And now we're going to talk about 3 more violent incidents in these shootings. We have one that was located over in South Felton. That's in King Sussing. We have another one on the 4100 block of North Broad Street in Hunting Park. We know the police fired weapons on a suspect over at 2nd and Market in Old City. So all of this violence creating so many problems and too many losses of lives.
I knew him, had met him. He was one of the best police officers this city has to offer, period. This 9-year-old boy that now is going to grow up without a father. A 1-year-old is going to grow up without a dad.
This is, again, one more example of the danger police officers and law enforcement personnel face on a regular basis.
The entire department is in shock and is in mourning.
It's a sad day for the Philadelphia Police Department. It's a sad day for the city of Philadelphia.
And the city of Philadelphia is remembering a hero. But the question is, how do we grieve? How do we mourn the loss of life? Now, lots of people turn to our Fox 29 Facebook page as an outlet for their grief. Lynn wrote, "What's wrong with this country? Good guys are being taken from us." Carolyn followed up, "My condolences to the officer's family and his family in blue." And Vicky wrote, "God bless you, Officer Wilson. Our hearts and prayers go out to your family, and thank you for your service. Rest in peace and know you will never be forgotten." But are there ways to grieve? Are there ways that we can move forward and come together as a community? And how do we stop this cycle of disrespect for life? Joining us this morning, Solomon Jones, morning host at 900 AM WURD, and Chad Lassiter from Black Men at Penn. Gentlemen, good morning. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning, Bill.
Solomon, let's start with you, actually, because I was listening to your show yesterday. There was a lot of discussion about healing, but some of that sounded like it also included concern for the alleged shooters and their families, and including them in the healing process. Tell me about that as this kind of universal healing.
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing I think we need to know is that this is a rarity, that this officer being killed in the line of duty, he was the first officer in Philadelphia to be killed in the line of duty since 2009. When you look nationally, this is not something that generally happens in the Northeast. In 2013, according to the FBI, there were 27 officers killed across the country, most of them in the South. Only 2 of the officers across the country who were killed were black. And so this is something that affects the black community, I think, in a very visceral way. And we see shootings far too often in the black community, in communities of color in Philadelphia. And so you see 2 families on each side of this grieving the loss of these young men who decided to do this, and certainly they should be punished to the fullest extent of the law, but they have a family, they have a community that is grieving that loss, as well as this police officer who also happened to be black, who was taken from our community. And so you have families grieving on both sides. You have the entire community grieving on both sides, not only the loss of life, but the loss of potential and the loss of their future.
Chad, Solomon said community several different times. And when you hear something like this that happens, there's anger, there's emotion, there's passion. But what's the community's role and response to try to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen again and we heal?
Well, Solomon is absolutely right. I think one of the things that, before we can answer that question, we have to back up and really articulate that grieving is part of a natural occurrence. It's deeply rooted. It's very significant to recognize that all individuals grieve. As significant as this particular killing was, the grief becomes really intense. I think within the community perspective, there's a lot of strength in community. And so community also is traumatized, and community is also grieving as well, simply because a lot of people from various communities have police officers who are friends, family members, and colleagues. And so I think that one of the things that we have to do is allow the grieving process to happen. We have to also recognize that the 5 stages of grief that starts with denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance goes through the process. It's a cycle. Communities have to also recognize that there are times where there are police officers who are leaving their communities and they're not coming home because of barbaric and demonic behaviors such as what we've seen. Solomon is right. One more point. All communities grieve, but we also have to look at the fact that the individuals who engage in this barbaric behavior also are going to lose family members, just like this cop lost his family.
Now, what I want to hear from both of you quickly, if we can, you know that the immediate criticism is that communities are outraged if it's a police officer that shoots someone in the community. Will that same outrage and emotion and protests and things like that happen now to call for an end to this when it's a police officer shot?
I think that you have to have that same level of outrage in our community when it's within our community, whether it's a police officer, whether it's somebody's son, somebody's father, somebody's uncle. I do think we have to be a little bit careful about the language that we use around people, calling them barbarians and that sort of thing. I think we have to be careful with that, because I think that, you know, the thing that I will never forget in talking about violence and poverty and education is a conversation that I had with Mayor Nutter in 2013 when I asked him, is there a correlation between poverty and violence in our city? He said, if you overlay two maps, one with the highest poverty areas and one with the two crime areas, the highest crime areas, those areas are going to match. Same thing with education. According to District Attorney Seth Williams, most of the people who are involved in this violence are high school dropouts. So as we disinvest in education, as we disinvest in our neighborhoods, then unfortunately we're going to see violence.
But it's
it's
also a lack of a moral imperative, Solomon.
Yeah.
As a social scientist, we can look at economic injustice, we can look at institutional racism, we can look at cultural variables.
Sure.
But this was barbaric behavior. This was barbaric behavior.
Well, I think it's also barbaric behavior when you look at what happened in Ferguson. And so I think that
absolutely. And I've been on Fox and I've done national shows where we've talked about Ferguson. But for today, we're looking at the fact that this police officer life was taken.
Yeah.
And we help communities grieve, and we should help our police officers in the city of Philadelphia by thanking them for putting their lives on the line every single day.
Absolutely.
The community should be outraged because of what these individuals
and
do.
the community
we're going to have to wrap. We're going to have to leave it there. I know that there's a lot more to this, and we will have you both back to continue this discussion.
All right.
Because obviously it will continue to evolve.